Okay, now that we're recording, so what are some examples of globalization? And you guys can pop in with voice or you can pop in into the chat. So examples of globalization. Just because you're on Zoom doesn't mean you get to get out of talking today. From Paul, world markets, definitely. Being able to buy products from anywhere in the world, yep. So being able to produce in, let's say, China or Indonesia and then sell in the US, or produce in the US and then sell across the world. Being able to talk on social media to anyone. So globalization, big cities, metropolitan cities, so like New York, huge melting pot of different cultures. So you have like Chinatown, places like that within big cities, Little Poland, mass communication. So being able to watch, the BBC, watch British news, watch news from Taiwan, watch news from Germany or Mexico. Here, while we're in the US, we don't have to travel, to Germany to watch German news. We can pull it up and say, hey, we're gonna watch that. So movement of goods, so raising cows in one country and selling them here in another market. Being able to have bananas all year round because of globalization. We grow bananas down in South America and they get shipped up, but we couldn't do that if we weren't globally connected, if we didn't have those markets in place to be able to do that. So personally, how has globalization either been a help to you, like helped you personally in your business, or maybe even been a detriment? I think the biggest detriment of globalization that we've all had this year is COVID, because that was able to spread so quickly because we are such a globalized world. We can fly across borders and not think anything of it. So Ashlyn already said one of the ways it's been a help is they were able to sell their family's cows in Mexico. So monetarily helping. So being able to buy different products from around the world. Clothing and technology, yeah, if we didn't have manufacturing in Asia, none of us would probably have a cell phone just because they would be too expensive to own. Like American-made goods are expensive. Cost less to produce overseas. Resources from everywhere else are usually cheaper than domestic. It's cheaper to buy steel from China than it is to make steel here. We're not going to look and see what that says about China's labor laws, though, because it's probably not great. Yeah, handmade clothing at a lower cost. You can buy handmade clothing from certain countries. That costs less than if I would have, if I have to pay Javen to make me a hat or whatever. Because we have federal regulations that say, here is the federal minimum wage. You have to pay someone that unless you're a waitress. Being able to watch some really cool Bollywood movies. Someone put one of the Bollywood movies into the discussion post for week 1 or week 2, and it was pretty fun. We're not going to talk about the imperatives unless you guys want to, because we've hammered on that quite a bit. Can you guys think of any examples of how power has played a role in communication, interactions, and situations that you guys may have had recently? Oh. That's what happens when we have 23 people on Zoom and 3 people in class. So how does power play a role in our situation, in the way we talk to people? So an example of this would be, let's say we're talking to someone from Saudi Arabia. Women in that culture, they have a lot less power than the men. That's just the way it is. So you have to be cognizant of that. Like if you're a woman talking to someone from there, just because you will be perceived differently based on your gender. Or in China, if you're talking to someone who's like the CEO of a company, you have to talk to them in a very specific way. You wouldn't talk to them the same way that you would talk to like a CEO of someone here. Just because of that power difference, they get deferred to a lot more. They get more respect for being in that position rather than, you know, just someone who's like a business owner, CEO here. We talk to them like normal people most of the time. Yeah. Trying to get a job, talking to management, like Ramon said, especially if someone who's hiring you is maybe of a different culture or you're a different culture than they are. Just because you have to think, okay, what is culturally acceptable to do? Like how much eye contact can I make that's respectable? Like, do I need to avoid eye contact in some cultures? You know, do I use certain words or names? So in China, the title for teacher is Lao Shi. So I might be Becker Lao Shi. But here you guys, like I've had people in this class call me like Kylie, and like it's whatever. But that's because we have a more equal power in this communication interaction than when I was teaching in China. You know, very different power. None of those kids, not that you guys are kids, but none of those students would ever think about calling me by my first name. And you guys like maybe think once or twice, and it's like, yeah, it's whatever. Yeah, different formalities when talking to different people. So if you're talking to someone who's older than you, you would use a different form. If you're talking to a group of people, I use a different form too. I don't think Mexico Spanish uses like the vosotros, but Spain Spanish does. But does it make a little sense that I've explained it that way? Because I know sometimes the questions might be like, what is that supposed to mean? But power plays a role in all of our interactions, like even with our parents. You know, when we're a kid, our parents have a lot of power over us, so we have to treat them in a certain way. But, you know, once they're no longer paying for our cell phones or paying for our car, you know, when we don't live with them, then that power gets a little more equal, and we can talk to them more as like human beings, peer to peer, rather than you are in charge of me. World leaders, so that's a really good example, Paul. So some world leaders definitely have more power than others. Some world leaders like to think they have a lot of power. Cough, cough, Kim Jong-un. Cough, cough. But that a huge one. So, you know, if the president of the United States meets, you know, the supreme leader of North Korea, obviously the rest of the world knows who has more power there, but they have different types of power. You know, the US has very like open, you know, we can nuke the holy crap out of most of you guys and just be like, woo, USA. But North Korea might have a different form of power of like, well, what could we do to you? You know, you don't actually know what we may have. So, any closing thoughts on that? So we are in week 3. So I think I published this page, so you guys should be able to see it, or you could be able to find it. But in our readings for this week, these are the questions that you need to think about. So next Monday, when we come and have our discussion, you guys are better prepared to participate. So for our first reading for this week, how has globalization changed how we see the other? So how do we see other people, or the capital other, who may have once, you know, been an enemy or not? What would happen if all countries suddenly closed their borders to trade or immigration or tourism? Voice crack. And then for our second one, do you think one person could be a culture by themselves? Can one person hold an entire culture within them? Some examples of culture being learned. What are some of your personal values? So an example might be fairness, respect, individuality, family, creativity, religion. And then do you consider yourself more of a collectivist or individualist? So those are the things you guys need to be thinking of for next week when we come and talk about these on Monday, because I do want everyone to be participating in these discussions. Like that's what they're here for. They're here to check up and make sure that you guys are understanding what we're reading. So when we're tested on it, or when you guys are tested on it, that you are understanding what we're doing. Okay, so since that one was a little bit of a bust, we are going to move on to our Kahoot for our review for chapters 1 and 2. This is not worth a grade. We do not have a test coming up quite yet. I think our first test will be February 14th, so it's 2 weeks away. We will do a test review before then, but this is just seeing, are you understanding where we're at so far? And the really annoying Kahoot music's gonna pop on. So please make sure that you are watching this on a computer or an iPad so that you can play on your phone or another device. Yes, we are reviewing 1 and 2 right now. And if you don't have a second device, then I will go through and I will explain the different answers. So just make sure that you are paying attention. I'll give you guys maybe another 30 seconds to a minute to get in. and I will give you guys the code if you get kicked out if it doesn't show it at the bottom. So we're gonna go get started. So this was from our building blocks and barriers. So your negative attitude toward a group that you have little to no experience with. So the key in there is little to no experience. So about half. So prejudice is your negative attitude with little to no experience. So discrimination is being able to act upon that, have the power to discriminate and say, no, you can't sit with us because, you know, you wear glasses, or because you're too blonde, or, you know, we don't like the way you talk, or whatever. Ethnocentrism is the belief that your culture is better than others, and stereotypes are generalizations based on, you know, family or media or things you may have heard. So the technological imperative of intercultural communication. So what is true about studying the technological imperative? So nice job, guys. So technology connects people to events that are happening even in corners of the world that they have never even been in. So it allows us to see, okay, well, what's going on in China with their different groups? What's going on in Egypt? What's going on in Madagascar? So it does not always strengthen relationships. It actually has increased our multilingual situations. And no lack of nonverbal cues tends to make communication harder because you can't see facial expressions, you can't see body language. But it connects us to events all around the world. So if you are from a collectivist society, then what would be true or generally true about you? There is only one correct answer for this. So if you are from a collectivist society, or a society that places importance on the collective, on the whole, then you are more likely to place importance on your extended family. So your aunts, your uncles, your cousins. You might even live in a multi-generational household where your grandparents live with you, your parents, you know, and yourself. You are more likely to use indirect or nonverbal forms of communication. You're more likely to emphasize the groups or teams rather than the individual. And you are more likely to use avoidance style conflict resolution, because if you're there, you know, with your extended family, as an example, you probably don't want a lot of conflict, or at least, you know, a lot of certain types of conflict. So, and then of course, if you're in an individualistic society, these would all be flipped. So you would place more importance on the individual. You would be more likely to emphasize the individual than teams or groups. You would tend to be more direct, and you would be less likely to use that avoidance style. So if we are looking at ourselves in the mirror, this is one of our imperatives. Well, actually, no, never mind. It's part of one of them, but it is not specifically one of them. Yeah, sorry guys, I think I confused you when I said it was part of one of our imperatives. Self-reflexivity, so looking at yourself, is part of the self-awareness imperative. Like I said, I'm sorry, I think I confused you a bit with that. But looking at ourselves in the mirrors, looking at our reflection, seeing who we are as a person and what we experience as a cultural being, we are being self-reflexive to learn more about ourselves and become more self-aware. So violence, conflict, or tension between cultural groups illustrate what imperative? So if we are looking at violence or conflict, we are looking at the need for peace. So we're looking at the peace imperative. So the more we learn about different groups, the more we see them as individual people, as people worthy of respect and learning from, and therefore we have, you know, less conflict, because when you see people as people, then you're less likely to be violent towards them. So it is the peace imperative when we're talking about war or violence. Ramon, hey Brianna, back on the board. So principles of conduct that shape the behavior of groups and individuals. So principles of conduct. Sorry, all of these things are related, so it's kind of like a trick question. So our ethics are our principles of conduct that help shape us. So yes, that definitely relates in with morals and values, but our ethical beliefs shape what we see as moral and not, and shape what our values are. So this was looking at like what's the top of the umbrella versus what's below it, I guess. Melissa's on fire. So changes in population are an example of what imperative? Yes. So changes in populations are changes in demographics. So population changes show the demographic imperative. So, in 2050, we're going to have over half of the United States population who is 2 or more races, I believe is what the statistic is. But that's a change in demographic. So changes in US population statistics. So our economic imperative would be, how can we, get more different types of people in the workplace and use that for marketing tactics, use that to make good business decisions. So a person who thinks cultural differences are mainly superficial, and that certain rules apply in all cultures takes what position in ethics? So if you think there are certain rules or ethical standards that apply in all cultures, what position do you take? Okay, nice job. You guys take a universalist position if you think that cultural differences, like most, are just mainly superficial, but that all have certain overarching ethics. So this was one of our questions from the discussion. Do you take a more universalist or more relativist approach? If you're a more relativist, you think that cultures can only be judged in the situation which they occur, so only people within a culture can judge something as right or wrong. Universalist thinks more certain rules apply for all of them, and the clothing, the dress, a lot of the beliefs just tend to be more superficial. So your learned pattern of behaviors, values, and perceptions that is shared by a group that is dynamic and heterogeneous is what? Okay, good. So your learned pattern of behavior, values, and perceptions that is shared is your culture. So true or false, if we remember, our masculine orientation is they stick to more traditional quote unquote gender roles. They value those more masculine traits. I think we talked about like the machismo culture in Mexico, at least in passing, unless that was with the other class, which is also entirely possible. But yes, that is true. So places like Japan, Austria, and Mexico tend to have a more masculine orientation, while countries like Finland, Norway, a lot of the Scandinavian countries have a more feminine orientation. Cute little animation. But so some questions that you guys might want to review, and you guys do have access to this. So your principles of conduct that shape behavior are your ethics. So we practice self-reflexivity when we look at ourselves to try to understand who we are in order to gain more self-awareness. If we're looking at violence, conflict, or tension, we're looking at the peace imperative. And then if you are from a collectivist society, you tend to place more importance on extended families, use more indirect communication and nonverbals, emphasize green groups and teams, and use avoidance style conflict resolution. While if you're an individualist, you place more emphasis on the individual, use more direct forms of communication just verbally, emphasize the individual, and use other types of conflict resolution. So any questions on that? So were there any questions you guys were extra confused about or anything? And we'll do the same type of review for our midterm and our finals. I know I had people who had questions about the research assignment. And I also know I had some people who were having trouble with the proxy server. So if you guys are off campus, you have to log into the proxy server in order to do that. And guys, we have an entire, I forgot about this. Oh, just kidding. It's not in this class. Never mind. We don't have the library module in here. I guess I could add it. But you log in with like your Gila Hank credentials, or you can just go down to the library and ask them to see what your like library login is. I think the standard password is like 1234. So it'd be like KMB661234 if I've never logged into the library before, and then you can set a password. But also try your Gila Hank. So let me take attendance real fast for the people who came in late. Did we get Angelina? No. Did we get Abby? Yes. Oh, we got Amber in. Did we get Peyton? Yes. And did we get Bryn? She's probably with Abby, pretty sure. They always
Yeah, she is.
I'm here.
Okay. So Peyton, I think it was you that emailed me about the research assignment.
Yeah, my citations like weren't really cooperating.
Okay.
I'll be in class Wednesday though.
Okay. Yeah, if you just want to bring it in and double check it, I can add a module with like a whole bunch of APA stuff in it too. I thought I had one, but maybe that was, I could be.
No, I followed it step by step, like your video and everything, and it worked, but I think it was something with my computer maybe.
Okay. So yeah, well, we can figure it out. And even if it's not like totally perfect with hanging indent, it's fine. But yeah, so if you guys don't have any more questions, then I will, nope, I want to stop the screen sharing. But then I will let you guys go and be free. Thank you guys for reviewing. Seems like most people did a pretty okay job. So, but then if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, shoot me an email and let me know.